Right. Hello, everyone. Lil Norwegians here. Thank you, everybody, for joining this stream for an overly verbose and analytical playthrough of Final Fantasy VII. So, a bit small preamble before we get straight into things. What exactly is this going to be? It is, it's going to be a Final Fantasy VII playthrough, but it's going to be a little bit more. I want to try to be a little bit analytical about that. What that kind of means is like discussing things that are happening on screen or things about story, music, gameplay, etc. as it happens. Uh, sort of deeply appreciative, but also a little bit critical way. Very much welcome discussion and questions, anything from chat as well as we do this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So it's also going to be not blind, but it's been a while since I last played. It's also going to be running. I'm going to be doing two controversial things with this. One is that this is the PlayStation 1 game, which I own probably 5 different copies of by now. So it's PlayStation 1, but it's updated and has like language updates to it. The Because Canon Addendum, I think it's called. Uh, I don't know exactly what goes in there, but the reason behind this is because original Final Fantasy VII is quite famous for having a rough translation. So you won't get any "this guy are sick" type stuff. The second controversial thing that I'm gonna do is basically as soon as we get the option, I'm going to change the color of the windows to something instead of blue. Since I'm developing combustion, I'm gonna be making it orange. So welcome everyone. I'm gonna show the little intro and then we'll get straight into it. Hopefully this works. Let's see. All right. Things haven't exploded yet. That's good. That's good. Let's see. My controller is working. This might even work. Oh, I was nervous for a second there. Oh, but yes, back when it was Squaresoft with a triangle in the A, not a square. Ah, yes. This classic. Oh, sorry about the cursor, everyone. We just heard this music in the intro, but yeah, I'll just say I was born 1991, basically 6 years old when this game came out in 1997. This was like a very interesting era, something I will definitely cover. The, whole fifth generation leap in CD technology, 3D, FMV cutscenes, the whole shebang. Everything saw a great leap. And it might not seem like much now, but it's one of those. It was definitely the era of huge leaps. And you'll see people talk about this, especially people my age who I feel were lucky enough to see it. Consider just looking up screenshots of, say, Final Fantasy VII and then Final Fantasy X, and then realize that was 4 years difference. So, this is let's see my controller. Let's get into this. Right. Very humble intro, right? Or humble menu, I should say. Don't have anything saved, so just gonna hit new game, and almost immediately I'm gonna be hitting on something interesting. Little factoids about the game as we go along. Let's get to it. Right. So already I'm gonna say something. This is interesting because this intro here, the released version of it, I don't know exactly know how it is in Japanese, but I know in the Tobalt #1, the demo of this game, there's actually text that's supposed to fill in a little bit of the plot of what's going on. That's the screenshot that I dragged in that you hopefully can see. And the released version of the game doesn't have that, and I feel it doesn't need that, but it does create this build up where nothing basically is happening for a while and we're just watching the stars. I mixed feelings about this intro. I think it's very much inspired by Blade Runner, which I think is um, even down to how it highlights certain things like Shinra, Avalanche, and such. I don't think it needs it, and but it does. It is weird how long this will now go on. Does it get rid of this? Getting back into the game. It does go on for a while, doesn't it? It does help set up the ambience. There is a bit of suspense, and I do love the transition that it does. Of the stars into the ruptured Mako pipe. Right. No, just kidding. Now, I'm going to say some things already. First of all, character names and pronunciations. First of all, this is Aerith, localized as Eris here in the West. I think the language patch will make it Aerith, but yes. Important things to note here is we've now gone from 16-bit sprites to pre-rendered 3D, and this is like the era where that's really coming into its own. It's post Toy Story, it's post Jurassic Park, it's post Donkey Kong Country. It's all the rage right now. We have gone from 32 megabit SNES cartridges. The Nintendo 64 is like 64 megabyte. I think the CD has like upwards of um, upper echelon of 600 something, 670, 80 or something, depending on the file size. And so seeing this is, genuinely like a massive leap, because suddenly you are seeing people, not little representations of people on screen. And this scene, I also feel, it does wonders for setting things up while being, and people are going to groan probably now because we've all heard about it in any kind of storytelling class or video or whatever. It's like the in medias res thing, where it's like in the middle of the action. Yeah, I think upwards of 780 if it's like dual layered. But like the differences is quite immense when you think about it. And so we've started. We started. This is also interesting that we start sort of infinitely big with the stars. Now we're focused down on one person, and we will still further go out. She walks down this back alley, and this does wonders to establish the setting as well. You'll hear me talk a lot about the style diesel punk, something I'm very very opinionated about. stylistically. As we get a shot of our prime location, I would say, Midgar. Still good. Still good. And then we go back down. Of course, the industrial train. This is also like a huge thing, the going from cutscene to gameplay. And something Final Fantasy VII does is it's very experimental. And there was also some disagreements on the development team. Something you'll actually see. Like we'll get more into it, but you'll see it tries live or pre-rendered video with 3D characters on screen to those same characters also pre-rendered, but in their sort of chibi style that you see here, to the sort of high fidelity model that you saw of Aerith. And it's my firm belief that the Midgar section of Final Fantasy VII, this whole starting part, is something that came or was done with a second pass way later in development, because there are areas outside of Midgar that definitely have a rougher feel to them. So yeah. Pigs, just a wedge. Star Wars characters, some of them, two of them. Of course, Cloud. I'll tell you right away, I won't be doing the voices. But what I will be doing is I will try and scoot this a little to the left if I can. Because it's a 4x3 game. Right. So here we are in Final Fantasy VII. We don't know really anything that's going on, just that we're this guy and some other guy has told us we have to go. And we're right in the middle of the action, and now I'm gonna be experimenting by drawing out the pen. God, I hope this works because it's so cool. Right. First of all, it helps if there we are. Perfect. Right. So this is us, Cloud Strife. And I have an art book, actually, which I'm going to be hitting up every now and then to get some interesting facts about development, the art, or whatever. So, pardon me. Just some interesting things. And I remember from reading this in the manual as well, it's kind of crazy to think about all these characters and how they are. It's like Cloud, canonically here, is 21 years old. He's born on August 11th, so it was, and I'm born August 12th, so that's kind of a funny coincidence. Every character has, of course, a listed blood type, of which Cloud's is AB, just in case you needed to do a blood transfer on him. Hails from Nibelheim, and this is kind of funny to me. It's like he's 173 centimeters tall, which is like about 10 centimeters taller than Cloud is, which is kind of interesting. And I wonder if that's with or without hair. Now we'll begin just overanalyzing here a little and talking about our friend Cloud here. Showing a little bit conceptual, because he was one of the first one done concept art for, and there's some interesting things about characters in this game in general, in that you don't really see this, but many characters have like two art passes on them, one in their realistic style and one in their sort of chibi style. So this is like the earliest known concepts I found to Cloud, and you can see how they basically had the idea right away for him. You know, they hadn't quite found the exact look that they wanted, but considering where the concept ends up, I would definitely call it on point. It's also interesting. I just want to mention the iconic Buster Sword, and how that at one point had like a grip here, and it's just sort of weird to think about. Like, there's so much in Final Fantasy VII that is iconic that it almost feels slightly heretical to think of a what would happen if things were slightly different. In all likelihood, we would still just eat it up. Especially minor changes like so. And speaking of characters, and this is something I have some hot takes on. But yeah, let's check the comments first. Yeah, I know there's a cultural thing involving blood types on that. I can't really speak about all these cultural differences and everything, but it's definitely not something that is unique to Final Fantasy VII. This is an example of what I mentioned uh, of characters having two passes, and also there being something of an internal dispute on Final Fantasy VII, and I would say a dispute even in the community, which is the chibi style. Now, obviously, this is early 3D, so why are they doing it like this? Well, one is just simply performance. There's benefits and drawbacks to this, I think. Inherently, I believe it's essentially the fifth generation method of replicating what they were doing with Final Fantasy VI. This is very much the style and anatomy of those old sprite characters, which goes uh, prior to Final Fantasy VI, of course. But that was the most advanced version of that concept at that time. Because if you think about it, Final Fantasy 1 to 3, at least, I think also the later ones, the overworld sprites are different from the in-game ones, or the overworld and battle sprites are different. Battle sprites are larger, and Final Fantasy 6 they are the same. Now in Final Fantasy 7 we've gone back to where there's pre-rendered overworld with chibi characters and then um, full 3D in battle and with more realistic anatomy and everything. And I remember even back in the day, this conceptually wasn't well communicated, especially since this is the first Final Fantasy that I played. Like, Europe really, I don't know, how many Final Fantasy we had gotten prior to this, even if we had even gotten three, like uh, like America, Final Fantasy 6 was Final Fantasy 3, and etc. So it's like this is trying to continue something that we definitely weren't aware of as kids, but we understood what it was. And as far as drawbacks is that it's very abstracted, but one area I feel Final Fantasy VII really benefits for going with this art style is that it has a huge variety of NPC character casts, and also they are able to have tons of them on screen at the same time. By the time of Final Fantasy VIII, they are going for more realistic interpretations of characters. Everybody has like real anatomy. Again, the overworld and battle one sprites or characters are the same, but that performance costs, and they weren't able to do as much with as many characters on screen. Right. So we're still on the first screen here. Let's wipe this away. I'll be trying to use the tablet from time to time to point things out. I will actually do that a few times more. So I mentioned Dieselpunk. Now, what's the deal with Dieselpunk? Okay, so I'll put it like as simply as I can. The whole punk genre is, just it's not an absolute. Let's be fair. Let's be reasonable here. It's just terms people like to use to describe certain styles. But what it does generally imply is like the punk part implies an exaggeration of in particular, I would say, technology of something of a certain type or era. And then you have the prefix, which is like cyber, steam, or in this case, diesel. And I would definitely say, so the easiest way of thinking about it is like steampunk. I would say is like the 1800s. It's like steam engines, locomotives, revolvers, Victorian era, Wild West, that sort of thing. Dieselpunk, I would describe as the stopgap between steampunk and cyberpunk. But there's of course a lot of bleeding over depending on where you set your sort of technology, as it were. Like you could, and no, there are several things of like World War One inspired dieselpunk, or this is definitely in like the 90s Final Fantasy VII here. And what's sort of the telltale difference between these styles? Well, for one, it's all how much 20th century it all is, I would say. And this ties in, I would definitely say, a lot with Final Fantasy VII. When you think about the iconic parts of Final Fantasy VII, there's definitely a more leaning to the 20th century side of things. There's a reason why there's a rocket launch, for instance, or how it's all about the, energy crisis, things like that. You can definitely argue the train is more, we're standing next to in the scene, is more advanced than like a steam locomotive, but it's not like the sort of thing you would see in Cyberpunk 2077, right? And just as a game developer who's developing a dieselpunk game, Combustion, there is one thing, and once you notice it, you won't stop seeing it in games, in pretty much all games with an industrial theme, which is these chevrons. These yellow and black chevrons here. They are everywhere. They are added everywhere without reason, without anything. It's like, why? It's like a warehouse building, right? Why does it have these like danger chevrons? If anything, it should be like on the ground here, right? Like stay behind and don't get hit by the train. But no. Instead, they just decorate the scene with them, and they are, as the kids say, very aesthetic. And I do abuse them myself. But it's like, we'll go along now. Maybe I'll mention, shout them out. Maybe you can keep a tally yourself on all the chevrons that you see. Now, that was probably like 10 minutes. But this is what it means to be overly verbose and analytical. So, going into this with like players' new eyes, we can walk around and we can do, well, basically nothing inside of the old inventory here. I do like how it's very deliberate in how little it tells you, like we are ex-soldier right now. And there's basically nothing we can do here. I'm just getting used to the menu navigation. We have some items. I would describe this menu system as a very utilitarian, because it's all basic UI boxes next to each other. Like regardless of what menu you go into here, it's still, all of it has the same visual motif. Now, I'm gonna do something controversial here. Let's see if we can get this nice and orange. Why am I doing this? Basically for funsies, because orange is like the most commonly used color in Combustion, and of course it is a complement color to blue. Maybe we actually want some blue shading down here. Let's see what we get, right? More yellow, right? Maybe we want like a little fade towards there. Yeah, let's dial that down a little bit. Let's keep this a very low sort of orange. Alright. Oh, sorry about that, 10x. I don't know. There's probably some settings on that on Nightbot. So sorry, sorry that you got that. We'll adjust this a little bit accordingly. If if I was doing something like a donation drive or something, I would make it so you had to pay for me to change that. Yeah, just walking around, you'll also be able to know that you can run. I think this is kind of like a test scene for the developers in a way. It has some quirks, like you can basically walk outside of the scene, which is, not something you should do. Oh, I just noticed we have a little blemish there. Perfect. And there's also, you can try and walk onto the train, but it has no effect. Oh, don't even start, Dave. Actually, that's interesting that you say, because during the development of Final Fantasy VII, one of the inspirational games for it was Alone in the Dark, which is kind of interesting because Alone in the Dark is always credited for inspiring Resident Evil. So it's, but it had an influence on Final Fantasy VII's development as well, in how it uses pre-rendered and real-time 3D graphics. You are rewarded a little for looking around, like this potion. I had like a discussion with somebody that the item sprite you see in the window there, top left. To me, that seems like a placeholder. I know it's trying to convey like an item bag, but it seems very strange to me. Like I really have to twist my head in able to be able to see it. I know it's a bag, Dave, but just very hard to see. Something more stylized could maybe have worked. So here we have our first combat encounter. We now have a screen transition into real-time 3D. There's those chevrons again, right? I would say, like, love these classic enemies. We've definitely changed era from previous Final Fantasies. These look like modern-day SWAT or something, or security. They have, like, small submachine guns, modern batons, modern armor, all of that. Just really like that comment from 10x there. We'll get more into the to the menus and everything. So yeah, there's definitely tons more to say, but I'm gonna try and space things out a little bit. That said, high fidelity environment definitely came later in development. It does have some problems, like there's a lot of things we of course give having played this as kids and having infinite amount of time, but when you consider this isn't particularly well highlighted, that you should go in here. But thankfully, Final Fantasy VII does have this feature of where you can hit select and be able to see where the exits are. So let's go, let's mosey on, let's mosey. So now, this is interesting that I never really was especially aware of, is that we're now on top of the station we were just at. see the attacks are being spelled out to us. So just for funsies. If I'm not mistaken, there's actually, outside of items, there's not really recovery spots in this section of the game. Thankfully it's fairly easy and everything, but still, you can die in this part. It is also impressive, I think. They did a lot of right things in regards to loading, because that was always the N64 versus PlayStation, or at least one of them. The issues was CD-based technology had loading, but I think they used the resources right. That there's very little actual feeling of loading in the game, which is great. I never noticed there's like a little sign in the bottom left there in kanji characters or something. Something we'll also get into. But yeah, let's get into the plot a little bit. Biggs on the left, Jess in the middle, Wedge on the right. You'll see also that this patch, I believe, it's part of the patch that you see highlighted names in yellow. Another thing is that in the original localization, I believe Soldier was in all capital letters. And this helps set up a little bit of the plot, where they're, asking Cloud, that is evidently more competent than the rest of the group, that he was from an organization called Soldier, which is a very confusing name for an organization, because are you a soldier in Soldier if you're like part of the security detail in other areas of Shinra? Are you not a soldier? What are you called then? And yeah, it establishes Avalanche, the eco-terror group. Explains how Cloud is something of a not a defect, but a defector. That's that he quit Shinra. And now we get something I find kind of interesting. This tradition of being able to select your name. I think this is back in the day. Let's just pause a little so we don't have the music. Back in the day, Dungeons and Dragons, which led to such video games as Wizardry and Ultima, before there was such a thing as Dragon Quest and or Dragon Warrior and other famous JRPGs. And there's like there's a time when these games are quite similar, trying to emulate the Dungeons and Dragons experience, but then at some point they deviate from each other, but they still have some shared DNA. And a legacy for Final Fantasy, basically for as long as it had text, and even going into Final Fantasy X, you were able to choose the name of characters. And that seems kind of surreal in retrospect, because if you were to suggest something like that now, unless it is like the point of the game that you're playing, that you're sort of role-playing as this self-made character, why are you allowing the player to choose a name for them? Aren't you just potentially diluting their, recognition in a way? Seems an odd thing to do with characters, but this was, this was literally the style at the time, and they kept giving you this option. And I think the reason why they stopped doing it is because, stop me if I'm wrong, but you're able to do this in Final Fantasy X, and that's why nobody ever says Tidus or Tidus. Nobody ever says his name. And they probably had to do a lot of writing around that, and to what end, to what benefit is there? Because it's not like a character that you can shape as you want them. It's a very strange tradition that went on, but I firmly believe it does come from the role-playing roots of these old games. Yeah, no, it's very true. It's very true, Dave. It's kind of awkward, but it's funny in a way. And you can, name your character something funny. I think I'm just gonna be vanilla about it and name our little boy Cloud, which is also, as names go, kind of interesting because it's a very innocent sounding name. And but funnily enough, it would go on to inspire other names in the franchise, like going from Cloud to Squall to Lightning. Cloud says it's Cloud. Biggs tries to say what his name is, but Cloud doesn't care. It's apathetic, which is also, I would say, kind of a brave choice. You go in medias res, there's all this action going on, and you have this guy, and he couldn't care less, it seems. Is it in it for the money? And of course, here we have Barrett, leader of Avalanche, the group that we're currently with, telling us what we're doing and why we're here. We're establishing some interesting character traits here already, like the different levels of competence. We have Biggs over on the left, who is more straightforward. Wedge, the round bloke on the right, seems a more concerned, while Jesse is doing something to fix the door. The sort of schism between Barrett here, Barrett Wallace, who I'll also flip up the book to read some information about. It's also interesting. Thank God, I'm still not at his age quite yet. Barrett Wallace here is 35 years old, born on December 15. So an old blood type, which is the universal donor one? I forget. His height, I feel, makes more sense with a strong 197 centimeters, almost 2 meters. And going back to the whole diesel punk motif, his gun arm, I would say, is definitely a good example of... It has this crudity about it compared to something like you would see in a cyberpunk story. We all get to that age, Mulgaro. It's like a few years now, and I'm as old as Tingle. It's also, this is also interesting in that we'll see a lot of fourth wall breaking, which don't really make sense, but it's, telling you something about the game. And this shot coming up is one of my favorites because it's really using the pre-rendered graphics for all it's worth in a very dynamic way, in something we don't really saw a lot of other games do at the time. Even something like Resident Evil never really did this, which is this sort of panning down and moving the camera with the 3D model, showing you where you're going, which is now already a good example of how, even with pre-rendered, this is now a 3-dimensional game, because we suddenly have gone from exclusively top-down to this world where the camera can move along. So we see here more chevrons. I could never make sense of this environment on our old television, like what's what and what's where. I don't know if there's any secret items or whatever. Probably, right? It does feel a little bit of a mess to walk around, but it works. But it works. I like how the machine gun did 4 damage while a baton did 7. But that's the rule of cool this game operates on, right? Even though they are gun users in the game, it's like you do it like Warhammer 40,000, right? The rule of cool says that the benefits of a melee or a firearm are a little bit negated compared to the benefits of a melee, which is just more powerful. This is interesting. This sign sticks a little bit with me. It's a piece of pre-rendered, but it's how it alternates between English and I believe I can't read kanji or any kind of Japanese really, but this sign alone, and you know a lot of other stuff as well, signage in this game in general is actually a big part of why in my game Combustion, which is very Norse inspired, is actually why the sort of unfamiliarity mixed with the familiar is why you'll actually see in the world of Combustion there's Futhark runes, like old Nordic runes, mixed with other languages, predominantly English, but other languages as well, as like the native written language. And Final Fantasy VII does come at a very interesting point in, call it, the cultural exchange between the East and West. In that this is, you know, when really things take off. We have, of course, stuff like the internet is helping to facilitate it. A lot of movies shared across, and that's how you get this. I would say Final Fantasy VII was always like a merging between the East and the West. Like conceptually, it was started out like as a detective story and basically set in New York. And another thing about that is how it influences other projects, because a lot of the ideas there got used on Parasite Eve. Let's just run along here. We'll try and talk to some of the characters. Here again, we have a verticality, which, you know, 16-bit could probably do something to emulate, but we suddenly get a little bit of vertigo. Showing that Wedge is a little bit of a Freddy cat. Biggs and Wedge are, of course, recurring characters in Final Fantasy, but also, you know, characters from Star Wars. Something Final Fantasy at least used to take a lot of inspiration from. I think the first appearance of Biggs and Wedge was in Final Fantasy VI in that game's opening. I don't know exactly what the deal is with these enemies. They seem a little bit odd for... You know, we have the secure... Like, the basic enemies here, I would say, mostly make sense. You have the security guards. They have their guard dogs, essentially. Later on, we see some robots. Some more chevrons. Okay, some new music here, of course. The Mako reactor, or Mako. I'll be saying Mako, probably. I've heard every pronunciation sort of argued this way or that. I go by what did I hear get mostly used. Carry on. Actually, let's take a little bit of a sip of water here. How's it going so far, guys? I did promise you that it would be verbose and analytical, and, you know, most people will probably be finished by the Mako reactor by now, but that's a little bit of the whole point of this, and if anything, I'm sort of keeping myself away from rambling too much. Oh, thank you. I will show, just because, take a small water break here. We'll show something that other piece of concept art. It is Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse characters. You know, also should say, spoiler warning. This is definitely, I'll definitely be spoiling things. I found this interesting because there's almost like a, not a lie, but it's like an expectation that this is going to be your sort of your party going forward. But they never serve in any combat role, but you still hang with these characters and get quite attached to them. One interesting thing that I noticed while reading the art book is there's a consistent trend where each of these characters does have a piece of red cloth, like you see around his head, around the head. And I wonder what if any story that there is there, because that does seem like a deliberate choice. I would also like to highlight that I love this era in game, and even anime, manga, things like that. I don't believe I've ever seen a description of it, but I would call it like exaggerated costuming or something. And what I mean by that is these things portray a certain style, but it's more exaggerated than it would be in reality. And I think something that really highlights that is something like take Resident Evil 1 and 2, and you have the Stars member and Leon Kennedy, and like their uniforms are very stylized compared to, they're not closely based on sort of a reality of how these things actually look. But the colorful exaggeration, these designs have become iconic in time, much more so than many other things. And I think there's something to that when games do that. Metal Gear Solid, another example I would give of that sort of exaggerated look to them. Like you think of things that are not bad, but more so forgettable. I think of like something like the costuming difference between, say, Metal Gear Solid and Splinter Cell. Not that Splinter Cell is bad, just they're trying for different things, and I have a little fondness for this type of exaggeration, and that's something I try, keyword being try, with my own game. Yeah, going back into this. Barrett asks us if we've been in a reactor before. Which is, obviously I have, because I've been in Shinra, the electric company, so of course I have. Now we get immediately into some of the theming of Final Fantasy VII. I do love how Barrett as a character is kind of delivering exposition to us here, but it's contextualized in the way that this bad thing is happening to the planet. Barrett is like, he definitely hates Shinra, the company, and his exposition is actually just berating Cloud, trying to make him care about the world he's in. Using these weird machines to suck up life. And because Cloud seems so apathetic, Barrett joins with Cloud. And this is interesting. What's the channel called? Feral knows. It's like Mega Elixir or something. This whole thing where a character goes into another character to become a party type thing is also kind of that's how it was in Wizardry and those old RPGs. I think here it's just kind of practicality and rendering for the most part. We all want to get paid, Magnata. Just talking to Biggs and Jesse here. Do you have anything to say? Ah, yes. You get an implication of Avalanche being much larger than it is, portrayed in game. Thank you, 10x. More chevrons. There earlier. I love how this elevator looks, and the random assortment of graphics. Like we're on the 5th floor, and pie. There's pie, evidently. High five. But yeah, no. What I just think if you can do something extra when it comes to exposition, that always helps. I would say something like Star Wars is a good example of doing that. I will reference Star Wars probably a lot of times, not because it's like the best thing ever, but it's something we've all probably seen, and it does a lot of things right. And the conveyance of exposition here is conveyed, I think, within a neat context. Like, we're doing this thing, and Barrett has huge stakes and care into this, while Cloud has not. And it's actually sets up a lot of things for our characters starting out, that there is very one-sided of this very aggressive, big-hearted eco-terrorist is telling us all these things, while Cloud, the guy we play as, could care less. Yeah. Again, kind of a brave choice, because like Barrett's talking about some very real things. This is, has been a discussion since before Final Fantasy VII and still goes on today. So it's an important matter, and to have our protagonist seem apathetic to it, helps that he has a cool design, of course. Of that. Now we're on Y1 floor, I guess. And musical note 0 or something. Look at all the chevrons, man! It's on the walls, it's on the floor, it's around the door. See what I mean? You notice these chevrons, and suddenly they're everywhere. This is a room, one of the rare rooms that gets reused later on. There's some odd things, like there's a lot of room to move around. I'm gonna try and not do that so much, because otherwise I'll just get worn down by the enemy encounter. But I think you can like go up on the ladder and things like that. And now we've gone in to have the regular combat theme. There's the chevrons again in the background. Preemptive attack. And I forget, I think we can't exchange materia right away. But yeah, again, these are enemies I feel make sense here. I don't dislike Final Fantasy VIII either, Dr. Waddle Lee. It's one of those games where I kind of want to love it more than I actually do, and I appreciate it for what it tries to do. And all the advances, all the just how the FMVs from 7 goes into 8. It's like reboot going into, I don't know, something else. One thing that should be noted is, like, this game, Final Fantasy VII, represented a lot of changes, stuff that is now still standard at the Square Enix, I believe. Like, they have their own, basically kind of art cutscene department, and at the time there was like a whopping 150 developers on this game. And it's kind of crazy how fast they were able to do it, but with enough manpower and everything. And they had like, I'll probably show that next stream, the prototype, the N64 build of, or video, where they tested with Final Fantasy VI characters. Let's see. That's another thing. How it does do some funny things with, you saw the door vanish there. There's a lot of overlaying in this game. And I believe what they're actually doing is they have a 3D scene, and they have the exact position of the camera, and so there is an actual in-game camera, but it's just at the same position, looking at the same direction with these bitmap graphics on top of it. And then they have sort of transparencies and things on top of that. And so basically what happened is I went into a trigger and it removed the door overlay on the door that we were in. Think of it a bit like how in old animated movies like Scooby-Doo, you would have like the background, and then a cartoonish layer on top of that. But it's more blended here. Definitely more blended. And here's just some more examples of things you don't really think about. Like, it's made sense so far where we're going, but it's like... Now we're getting into deep into the industrial level here, and there's like a... This is not OSHA compliant, and like... does also show something of Final Fantasy VII's movement that we'll be seeing a lot, which is the jumping. But yeah, no, it's very interesting how... Maybe because the excuse here is that we're taking a very inconspicuous route down, and that's why, you know, we're walking over rotten floor. And evidently we're in Sector 19G. I heard there was a lot of problems over at 7G, so we're lucky we're not there. Bet one of you in the chat got that one. Little Simpsons reference. And we're being taught some things, you know. To talk to Jesse, we basically have to go through this. Here we see another effect that I talked about, the transparent smoke coming over cloud there. Stuff like this we're gonna see definitely a lot more of, and that's why also I believe the Midgar section saw a lot more attention than later areas. Yeah, just giving us tutorial messaging. And... I always go up, typically I always go up. But yeah, now we also see a benefit of the technique that I mentioned, because this is still the same room, they just changed the camera angle for us. And I know that there's definitely touch-up on these images. If anybody of you know the game, the Oddworld games, which also have a diesel punk style aesthetic, if you compare and contrast Final Fantasy VII with Oddworld, like Abe's Odyssey and Abe's Exodus, for instance, you'll definitely see what I mean in how they sort of operate aesthetically. Sorry, passing through the chevrons here to the save point, which is like, I don't know, 6 polygons or something. More than that, I'm just joking. Let's save the old-fashioned way. I'll set up save states sometime. But I just want that old feeling. So this is nice, you know, fifth generation. This is their 7th Final Fantasy. They know exactly, or know a lot more how to, you know, guide the player along, be slightly merciful. See that we're missing a section there, which is probably the materia one, so I can't like change Cloud's materia and give one to Barret, for instance. Formation is an odd one. I don't think this one gets explained until the tutorial house. This also brings me a little bit to something I think the Final Fantasy VII series does quite well in general, which is something I've described as number feeling, which is something most games do, in that you see these stats, for instance. Okay, Cloud has 36 attack, 96 accuracy, strength of 18, for instance. What does this mean? You know, there's math behind all of this, but there's no way, unless you break out an Excel sheet, that you can like calculate actually how much damage you are going to be doing to an enemy at the time, right? But you have a rough feel. You also have some ideas of type advantage, and the Final Fantasy series does this a lot. So unlike something like the Wizardry series and Dungeons and Dragons that I mentioned previously, where, you know, a hit point in Dungeons and Dragons, especially early on in Dungeons and Dragons, that's a lot. You can run a character that has like 1, 2, 3, 4 hit points alone, for instance. But here it's a lot more loose, I would say. And every game does this to a degree. And that's also a challenge for a game developer. To use a totally different example, Balatro. The ever popular Balatro has numbers feel. And you can read up on the development of that, and you can calculate exactly how much you're going to be scoring on the cards in that game, for instance. And there was actually a system for that at one point, and even some players during playtesting who would sort of figure out exactly how much any combination would give you in terms of chips in that game. But the developer decided not to have that final piece, so you don't know exactly how much you're going to be making with the Joker synergies, for instance. And even strategy games, Civilization does this. You have a rough idea of how much you're going to be making in science, economy, military, but not everything. And this is like a benefit a video game has over, say, board game, where you have to account for everything. You saw that little signage saying 998. Like, really just look at this and the industrial nature of it. I really love it. So we're going up to a boss now. Yeah, I still play pen and paper role-playing games with my friends. And I will mention a small interesting factoid. I mentioned steampunk previously. The whole punk thing actually comes from, or was popularized by the role-playing system of choice called GURPS. GURPS is not as popular as it used to be, but all still hugely influential. It's kind of a role-playing / simulation sort of system. That's why you can play any setting or whatever in GURPS. And at one point, GURPS was going to be the system for the Fallout games, actually, until Steve Jackson Games backed out. But what I wanted to say, Steve Jackson Games, which developed a book, role-playing book called Cyberpunk, which got them raided by the FBI because they thought they were doing something that they weren't supposed to, instead of developing a RPG system. But they also developed the GURPS book, Steampunk, GURPS Steampunk. And that was very popular, prolific, and helped establish that term, steampunk. I think it's actually the earliest use of that as sort of an offshoot to cyberpunk. An interesting factoid, you could technically call the Flintstones stone punk. Feels weird, doesn't it? Of course, this becomes a whole bit TV tropes to dissect things. So back to the game. Sorry. Barrett's like suspicious of Cloud, so asks him to plant the bomb. And we get a hint of something being wrong. Cloud is checked out. We all disassociate from time to time, right? Now we get into our first boss. Iconic first boss. I got to get the material later on so I can help with the names on this. You'll see a lot of the PlayStation 1 dithering whenever the effects are played. Speaking of effects, like the sound effects in this game is not something that saw massive advancement. There's definitely a lot of them, but there's still developed in very much the same way as as it were in Final Fantasy VI, which is definitely a style in and of itself. But when you compare this to, say, later PlayStation games, like take your Metal Gear Solid, where it's mostly bit crushed Foley sounds, this is still using sort of the generated sounds uh, of the what's it called, the sound program. Oh, I forget forget what it's called, but there are some probably some sound exceptions. We all know that there's a very famous song in this game with vocals, so definitely there are probably going to be sounds like that. But when you hear also the bit the very crunchy sounds of this game, it's very iconic. But it's also definitely to save on space, because a thing to consider is this is a 3 disc game, and that affords a lot of space, but each of them needs to have certain things, like they call it the base game, with all the characters, all the sounds, all of that thing. So I would like to know how much each of those 3 discs share equally. And I imagine they've sort of copied over wholesale, like all the attacks, all the sounds that you possibly could do, so there's no discrepancies. Let's see. Probably heal Cloud eventually. We are using the active time battle system, the ATB, which is I'm definitely fond of. I don't know how much I can defend it mechanically. It does keep it at a higher tempo than the other games. I believe 6 actually does have this system. So get the potion. Get the potion in your Cloud. Drink up, buddy. You're gonna be hearing that machine gun sound a lot from Barret. Okay, hang on. There's like a defend option, right? I never understood that as a kid, like the whole when the tail is up, because I couldn't read English that well, but definitely learned over time, so I didn't know that, don't attack while the tail is up. I would like to see the contractor for this giant mechanical scorpion thing. Like I have this idea for I have this idea for security on our power station, right? Hear me out. Locked on target. See if we can get a limit in. This does help, especially if you have prior Final Fantasy experience. Does help. The limit break. Something of an iconic part of this game. This is also something I would like to say that is I find very funny about the 5th generation. Is now, basically, until now, there's been like a real restriction on the amount of colors that you can have at a time in games, right? And I think when we get to this 5th generation, that's when you see there's a lot of rainbows going on in different games on both the N64 and the PlayStation, where they use all the colors kind of because they can. Like if you think about, you have the limit break here, the bar at the bottom, all the rainbow colors, then you see a lot of rainbow things in, say, the Mario games for the N64, to even like the leveling up in and other effects in Castlevania Symphony of the Night. So I think a lot of this is just a little bit as a programmer myself, is that you can sort of program something to cycle through things, and oh, that looks good, that looks visually interesting, but it does seem a little bit odd aesthetically for some of these games. So, when characters in Final Fantasy VII get mad enough, they get access to a limit break. You see the game's doing a lot of things with the camera. Just, you know, gameplay sense, there's actually nothing 3D going on. Except, arguably one thing. Like, Barret here actually was supposed to have a unique mechanic to him, with shooting various types of ammunition. That was later taken out, and so there's not really a huge difference between the characters in the game and their weapons. With the odd exception, the game does follow an internal piece of logic where if Barret or later on Vincent and I think maybe some other characters are using a projectile weapon, they can hit flying characters where other characters cannot. And Barret later on does get some melee weapons, and then he stops being able to fire at flying targets. And I have no problems with that. I actually like that. It's just a little bit of internal logic. Like this alarm and the alarm in GoldenEye 64, like iconic alarms of this era, right? So I'm not gonna try and get us killed here, so we'll actually just try and run out. And I wonder if this works, like you can... Like you can do a little bit of a run, and then it resets them back, and I always wonder if that helps or not. Like if you run just for a frame, they do turn the other way around, but I don't think it actually changes their logic state. Ah yes, Final Fantasy VII Remake. I should say that is definitely in the cards. Something I want to get to later. And I have some experience with it. I haven't been able to play it myself, but I have seen people play it and compare and contrasting. I think I can get into it in a good state of mind, like not be too purist about that, because I know it does things differently. So that's definitely in the card to play one day, to compare and contrast to this. I love the train counter up in the top left. It's like a type of thing you actually see in real life train stations. Well, at least you used to. And it's one of those things that I didn't understand why they were scribbling behind the number, but now I do. Welcome back, Mulgardo. Let's get the potion in here just to be safe. Yeah, Mulgardo, there's so much in this game that is iconic. I was wondering about these dudes as well. Are they like just guys in suits, or are they monsters of some description? Because is it like, okay, you work security detail, you get a machine gun and baton, and if you're one of the other guys, you get like a gimp suit? You got like a gun. So, you know, you see who we got there. We can compare and contrast stats and everything. You know, there's little things here that I know Final Fantasy VI and probably the others did this as well, but that's also something that Final Fantasy generally has been very good at. Like, the easy flow of letting you know exactly how much information that you need to know. Like, how this works, how it changes your stats, etc, etc. Yeah, that's exactly my thought as well, Tenax. Like, This still will not be the day, but I always wondered if you leave Jesse here, does the game react in some way? Probably does, right? This is like an example of where the little bit of the chibi style is a little bit difficult to, because it's a little bit difficult to understand what's going on. Like her foot was stuck. Whoop. Oh, I almost got stuck. Yeah, like I know Shinra, like majorly is just guys and dudes. We'll see a lot more of that later. And I think that's also like one of the things that makes Shinra interesting as a company. Like the whole thing about it is, you know, it's all human, good and bad. And you have bad people, many of them at the top at Shinra, but then you have like you walk around and you see people. Even when you get to places like Cosmo Canyon and such, it's like this entire world has been touched by this new era of technology thanks to Mako Energy, and no place is really spared of that. It's just to various different degrees. It's like ever present, and that's kind of how it is nowadays. You know. Okay, let's leave musical note 0 and get up to the pie floor. It's like remembering the order. Actually, I think was an ether, right? We're good. Now we're gonna see that combination again. Pre-rendered graphics mixed with live 3D or real-time 3D. Oh, actually, they have a separation. Explosive finale. This is where the Final Fantasy VII demo ends, and you know, you could call it I would call it iconic, like genuinely iconic as game openings go. We get to know that we won the battle, but the war isn't over. We get a little showcasing again of Jesse. Love it. Now we're doing something kind of smart with the pacing, right? Because now we're gonna slow down a little. We've done the mission. We still maintain a little bit of tension because, you know, everybody's going their separate ways because, you know, we just did all of that, which is gonna, you know, shake up the hive, so to speak. Look at all this detail, man. For 97, that's crazy. Some of it actually goes beyond, you know, gets so much detail that becomes hard to read. Something I find interesting. Anxious art. It's there's also a great deal of melancholy in this game, like a kind of tragic feel to everything. This flower seller, wonder what her deal is. Actually, I think I should have picked the other option. Never mind. Well, we'll meet her later, maybe. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Sorry. I'm doing a deep analysis of this pre-rendered graphic. I don't have time for women. Look at Cloud looking intently. E. This actually takes me, or reminds me of how much effort you should put into realizing something, and how much is just fun expression. Because you see this sheet of paper, and it's just a sheet of paper, but somebody had to, make and animate that, and it's like a question of how much effort. Because I can't actually see most of the graphics that is on there, or even the lettering. And it reminds me of a thing from the book Creativity Inc. about the founding of Pixar and etc. And there's like an anecdote in there where like a director is, or there's like a thought about not chastising, but an animator is like making a stack of CDs, which you see in the movies Monsters Inc. It's like Mike Wazowski's music collection. And there's like a gag in the movie where one disc is pulled out and all the other CDs fall over. Now the thing is that the animator actually made the individual graphics for each of those covers with puns and everything. But even on on a 4K resolution, you're not, just because of how they're stacked and everything, you don't really ever get to see those graphics. And so then the question became, why are you doing this? We won't see this. It's just like a blur. But the guy just wanted to do it. Like, he was just a passionate artist that just doing these graphics, and he had time to do it. He was doing it on his own. And so the director was just like, yeah, thumbs up, keep at it. And yeah, I think there might be a lot of things going on in this game with that as well, because it no doubt was also a very exciting time to be able to do all of this. Like, you couldn't import all these bitmaps and models and do all these things on 16-bit, so no doubt people expressed themselves a lot. And we saw the advertising above here for Loveless, which is like a play or something, which actually gets elaborated on in further games. I don't think there's any mention of it as an actual play in this game, but it gets elaborated on because it's such a prominent graphic in this part of the game. And I think that comes from somebody cared. Somebody had a vision and added that to the game, and you can tell these things. This electricity that we're seeing here, this thing, right, is like, I think I have like a bone to pick with movies and games and such, and that is how electricity used to look in fiction. Like, it's stuff like this, and say the Force lightning in Return of the Jedi, and it's this very specific look of the blue electricity, and we've kind of gone away from that stylistically. Don't see it as much anymore. And I just really like that, and we'll see that a lot used later in the game, because of course electricity is a big part of this game's story, as highlighted when we talk to some of these people. This also sets up some and Final Fantasy games around this time are actually very good at setting up interesting scenarios, in that we are supposed to be the heroes, we're supposed to save the planet and everything, but you walk around here, you witness all this destruction and everything, and it's like, it's not gotten to an era where everything are like deconstructionalist, but it definitely adds a dimension to the cast of characters, I would say. I want to highlight something on this screen. It's one of the windows there, yes. Something not many people think about, but you see the little silhouettes in the windows there? Just hang on a little bit. There's like something going on. And like I have a gift somewhere that I made of that, and it does look like, especially in the if you loop what's going on in the second window to the right, it does look a little strange. But I think it's meant to convey that people are like wondering what's going on outside. And now, after this encounter that we're gonna have, we're gonna see something. Let's see, just making sure that I got full health. We're gonna see interesting because we've had Cloud in real-time 3D, engaging with a cutscene. We've had Aerith in her like high detail in the CG cutscene. We'll also get Cloud in his high detail, but we're actually gonna see Chibi Cloud in a pre-rendered cutscene after this, and this stems from kind of an internal struggle in the development team. Because some people wanted it this way, some people wanted it that way. Sometimes this was more economical, sometimes this was more economical. And so you get like an odd... It's very odd when you think about it, because later on, when we're on the motorbike with Cloud in his high detail, keep this next cutscene, Cloud, in mind. Yeah. I'm gonna pick a fight. Oh, hi, Makers. Yeah, no, this is... I needed this to be the PlayStation version. With all the dithering and everything. But it is running a language patch. Oh, critical. There's that gun sound again. It's actually interesting there, because I didn't click anything. And you had limited time. And I don't remember if there's that many sort of timed areas where you have like a finite time to make a choice. You just have to imagine that the people in the windows are like seeing this happening. And so we're like going on to 5 people dead in the street. Or you can, you know, it's abstracted. You can imagine Cloud knocking them out, but would he? And robbing them. Let's keep in mind it's like... It's video games, it's abstracted, of course. Let's take these guys as well. Just for the body count. You'll see in the background, it's kind of a sparse background compared to a lot of others, but you know, just the right use of repeated textures, you can get a lot done. I was gonna say that I get perpetually getting backshots here, but that's neither here nor there. Shot in the back, rather. Look at that shadow on Cloud, it's so... quite a deep shadow, isn't it? Nothing. Here's the cutscene I talked about. Game's full of these little vignettes. Hi, cutscene Cloud. In your low poly version. In pre-render. Steal everything you can in an RPG, right? It's very strange. Like, I know in The Witcher, for instance, you can just steal everything. You can just walk around, take stuff, for instance, and that's like a modern RPG. And Avowed, the new Avowed game, I know you can do that. That's definitely not a D&D tradition. They're all sad. Seems like Cloud couldn't make it. One thing I also think that this game, especially for the era that it was made, did right. And it's something also that they probably took notes from Star Wars on, is what they call greebling, right? It's all the surface details on everything. Just the right amount of indentations and outdents and everything. And I like this. You get little signifiers of what people think. Barrett's obviously upset by this. You know, if Barrett didn't have a heart, he wouldn't be upset because, you know, he owes Cloud money. So obviously he would maybe have preferred not to pay him, but he cares. And of course Jesse here takes it with a little bit of an extra heavy heart, setting up that there's something there. Which is actually going to lead me into an interesting parallel later on. Would you guys prefer if I did read out all the dialogue? I'm giving like synopses of it. Just that I really can't do voices or imitations or things like that at all. I do like Barrett also has some colorful language. I think he has some, maybe not in this version, but he has like some cartoon censorships. Their use of the word jackass. Wedge asks for his pay. Here's a little point on lighting as well, because this is all pre-rendered bitmaps and everything, but there's still an ability to convey certain things. And I think the light print, there's a light behind the Wedge's head, which has some fog sort of volumetrics implied to it. And that's actually why I have volumetric lighting in Combustion. It's sort of meant to imply a level of detail that wasn't real time for this era, but they got around making it with other methods. Because if you know anything about 3D Engine, if you don't have a volumetric light, that sort of halo you see on Wedge's head on the left, you would actually not be able to see without volumetrics. Cloud is back and playing it cool. Barrett's, of course, calling Cloud selfish and reckless. And now it's like beginning to... I think it's gotten to a point now where Cloud is getting a little annoyed at Barrett, but he also knows how to tick him off, so he starts ticking him off more and more. Right, let's mosey. There we go, everybody says a kind word. But yeah, see that light over there? Just the general fogginess of it. Oh, it's gone. And Jesse gives a little... cleans up Cloud a little. I don't think there's anything to be done in this room, but it's nice all the same. Music seeps in. Again, going back to think about the trains in Cyberpunk and things like that, and how distinctly 20th century all of this sort of looks. Hey, there we had the punk. We had the punk in Diesel Punk. Just ran out. I know I watched somebody play the Final Fantasy VII remakes up until around this point, and what struck me is, going back to what I said earlier about character designs, I think what I saw from the Final Fantasy VII remake, the recreations of the Avalanche characters was all very faithful, like Barrett and everything, but there was I would have to play it to say something more definitive, but there was like a discrepancy between how they look and how everybody on board the train look. You know, they're main characters, so of course they look a little bit more exaggerated, but Barrett has like a tuffle with some employees from Shinra, and they're just normal humans in normal suits, right? And it's very interesting to see that in high definition. Anybody who lives in a big city know, of course, train is a free bed and restroom. Can't say I've seen too much of that in Oslo. The Shinra Times. The big corporation, of course, also owns the newspaper. And so much else. And, you know, Final Fantasy VII is not the most subtle of games at times. You know, all the richer for it, but for many of us, it was also kind of a first exposure to many of these themes. And I think something also unappreciated is, I believe on like the 16-bit Nintendo hardware, like sound layering, for instance, we can have the music, we can have a background ambience and sound effects on top of that. So you hear the train now, and we'll hear some computers afterwards. I like how he's trying to look cool, but, you know, you're not as cool as me, Biggs. Oop. Okay, sorry. I actually forget, I know Biggs and Wedge are characters in Star Wars, but I actually forget which characters they are. I think they both are pilots and they die in the movies, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, Wedge. This is also like, you know, less character driven, I'd say, but Jessie's like explaining stuff to you, and it comes from, you know, she's just very interested in technology, essentially. This is the wireframe that the Squaresoft art department provided us to input in the game. So, yeah, that's probably just the actual model. And yeah, the city of Midgar, very beloved, very iconic place, and I'm very jealous of it because I'm going with a Norse theme in Combustion. Of course, Midgar is like the Nordic, the Norse plane where the humans and everything resides. And of course I couldn't use that, so... Oh yeah, definitely. Mackers. Little light next to the console here. Around 1/10,000 scale. I wonder if that's actually accurate. I'm reminded of Song and Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones, and the writer on that, whose name escapes me right now. But yeah, there's the wall in the north that's a wall of ice, and he wrote like a number, like it's 50 feet tall or something. And then when they did the HBO adaptation of that, you get to see the wall, and it's like comically big, and he was just like, I think I maybe might have written it as too tall. So just scale. Scale's funny. Yeah, most likely not accurate at all, right? Explaining how this city operates. This is just a little bit interesting, like, you're getting the explanation for this city, and it's like, it's composed of all this thing, and, you know, we blew up Reactor 1, and it's like, I would hope my teammates were more on the up and up than I would have to, like, explain to them what we just did when we did, like, such a big event. There's one part, like, we're getting into the Mako here and how it's sapping the lifeblood of the planet. And say what you want about Advent Children, but there's some parts of that movie I really like, which is set after Final Fantasy VII. And I don't know if this is a localization thing or if it's actual dialogue, but I do distinctly remember that over the phone, Barrett is like talking about how they found oil. And it's like, good, nurturous, pure oil. And it's like funny in sort of contrast to our own world where, you know, oil is a pollutant, but in this Mako sapping world, it's the lesser evil. I might be misremembering that, but I do remember laughing about something like that. Sorry. That was the game, not me farting. Yeah, and here we see some of the insertion of random words, I would say, into the game. Like the 8RX station that it said in the top left there. Probably means something to someone, but you know, this is what you do with these sort of things. The honest truth is, like, we're all winging it when we make settings and places like this as artists. We have rough ideas what they're gonna do, but if you actually stop and think about most environments in games, like really analyze them, first of all, you're probably sapping out all the fun of it, but you'll you'll also see how stuff usually doesn't make sense, right? Be it Shadow Moses, Black Mesa, Aperture Science, Midgar, like, very little of it makes actual sense places, but, you know, it's video games, it's fiction, and rule of cool. Well, isn't it technically like... Yeah, well, sorry, Mulgar, yeah, you're definitely right. I thought you meant it the other way around. Just a little example of post-processing, I would say, as much as you can call it, sort of over-screen effects. That's I don't think there's epilepsy things, but just in case, epilepsy warning, I guess. No, there's sites you can look that up if you're nervous about that sort of thing. Let's be nice. We weren't nice to Aerith, so let's be nice here. He said that we're looking forward to a custom fake ID with more pizzas. That's how that's said, right? I'm a non-native English speaker. Establishing the plates, right? The whole vibe of this is so great. Everything about it, I think, is great. You're just full of surprises. That's iconic as well. And one thing about writing is this is also true in the original to a degree, even with its sometimes poor translation. It's like a lot of things are kind of written as they are phonetically, like the apostrophe after just. You're just full of surprises, and you know, do that a little bit, I can appreciate that. I know not everybody does that. I've met people who are upset that the exclamation point exists because it doesn't have any sort of objective anything objective going on to it. It's like putting an emotion into something. So it's essentially argued that it's kind of like an emoji. So I disagree with that. I just think, especially when you're doing video game writing, that really helps. And a game that I really liked for doing things like that and just keeping things short form was A Night in the Woods, actually. Yeah, pipes as well. Like, really analyzing these scenes and how they're made is like great fun to do. But yeah, like the whole technology sort of seeping in everywhere, I think is great. There's very little in this game I feel is slick in terms of way. There's only finite things, and it's like mostly when we get to the Genova stuff later. But it seems like the everyday technology that we're viewing here is, yeah, very lived in, very worn, which is kind of incredible to be able to do in this early in 3D. We get to know more about Barrett's plight here, or issues with Shinra. I like how Cloud asks why people under the disc, under the rotten pizza, as they call it later in the song, why people just don't move up to the surface. And it's like sort of Cloud's basically saying, why are there poor people? Why don't they just buy more money? Barrett rightly claims, can't. And again, going back, for a lot of us, this was first exposure to these themes and things. Poetic statement. Cloud there. Another quite iconic shot, I'd say. Some small chevrons in the background as well. Nice establishment of everything. There's like Dr. Weldy, there's like a plate where, you know, average to upper income live, and underneath that is like all very polluted and slums, which we'll get to explore. Because essentially this is, you know, it's like a Midgar, I would say, it's like a city of broken dreams. It's like, definitely feels like there was a point in history where there was like a promise of Mako technology and all the benefits of rapidly developing technology, industrialization, and all of that. And now we're like living in the era of those dreams having broken down. Hello, TMG. Late stage capitalism. I don't know. Not gonna get too political or anything, but there are things the game touches on that are symbolic, but also very real. You know, you can look at things and compare and contrast to how things are now, and you know how things turned out. I'll find a better way of communicating the more I do this streaming thing. Barrett telling us, in summary, to play it cool. I'll keep on playing a little bit more, of course. Just now that there's no combat encounters or timers, we can walk around and talk to people. Music, of course, elevates this to a whole vibe. But yeah, even the track like Anxious Heart conveys so much, I feel, about the mood and feelings in this whole situation. Actually, well, I hope I don't die here. Okay, well, no, just one of these guys. Oh yeah. Is it the track that gave you nightmare, DMG? Wouldn't happen to be the one when you're creeping around the Shinra place after Genova's broken out, is it? Okay, talk to people here. There's a little bit glimpses of happy, glimpses of silly, but also, yeah, a deep sort of melancholy about the situation. I think this guy is taking a piss. He's pissing on the chevrons. Huh? Ah, right. It's just looking up, I think. Tiny, tiny models. This place, of course, becomes relevant later. Setting things up. Oh, thank you, JMG. I'll check that out later. Is the implication that this peeing? Just wondering what that animation is all about. Just save. And check out Tifa and everything, and then sometime after that we're gonna call it quits for today. Probably gonna be streaming two times, if not 3 times this week. Trying to make affiliate here on Twitch so we can do the fun, rewards, the emotes and everything. A little bit of humanization, please, to, I guess, Shinra employees. Yeah, lights in this. It's kind of like, look at all the glow that's going on, like seeping out of the woodwork on the left, on top of the bar there. I believe it's like a mix of things that were the volumetrics they kind of did in the pre-render, but also, definitely stuff on top. And we see some stuff is pre-render or preset, so the lighting here, for instance, while this on the left is animated. And I wonder, I know I would definitely leave an area if somebody came in and just shut up the place. One way to get people out. The play to like Barrett probably wouldn't play stupid. I'm gonna keep playing stupid. Again, it's like call it good contextualization of reinforcing things or getting information to the player is actually like players are very good at telling when they are being talked down to, right? But just doing a few things differently will help with that. Feeling. But yeah, you see here, right? It's like this sort of bleeding out of light there. There you have all these light halos and everything. It's like this is kind of the reason why, and you see this in a lot of games because even though everything was pre-rendered at the time, they understood the value of good lighting, and that's the why I have volumetrics in combustion. Even though it's different, it has that. This is how we remember it as kids. Like this on a CRT with all these sort of overlays on top and everything and animated lights, you still get a foggy experience. And here we're gonna see a start of something that I think is funny, is the sort of lettering of different types. Because actually, let's head into the bar because there's a funny example. Because we've had written Japanese and kanji characters, and then there's like a sign in here. The introduction of Marlene, of course. Yeah, we argued with Barrett. Oh, and Tifa's got her back, of course, because she's the girl next door childhood friend to us. When you were little, you got into fights at the drop of a hat. And speaking of Tifa, why aren't you wearing your cowboy hat? Why did you stop wearing that? I know people find that funny, and I also do that. Tifa in the flashback are like wearing a cowboy hat. But yeah, draft beer, and then there's a sign for Texas. So Texas exists in some way, in some form, in the world of Final Fantasy VII. Going by the signage on the right there. and I know it's just a bit of color. You don't really think about these things, or you're not supposed to. At least it's like when the orcs in Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson movie says that meat's back on the menu, and it's like, why does an orc know what the menu is? Is the restaurant in Isengard? Yeah, look at all this detail that we're able to cram in here. All the little glasses and everything. There's a funny line from Wedge here, if they haven't translated it, because he likes the cooking. Maroli Poly. Well, as much as a low poly character can be. Low poly. Very round all the same. I think it's very funny abstraction in video games. And I think one of the abstractions we see a lot of is the way a person told me about video games is can sometimes be the opposite of movies in what's difficult and what's easy, because an explosion in a movie, at least back in the old days of practical effects, that's expensive. But in video games, making explosions, all things considered, that's very easy. But having a person eat in a movie, that's very easy. That's super easy. But making a character eat believably in a video game, that's very difficult. Like, you guys remember the Yakuza bread thing when people were freaking out because it was like a very high detail cutscene of a character eating a piece of bread? And so we see these little repeated animations here of them eating invisible food. It's actually in the art book here that Biggs is straightforward, competent, almost like a leader type himself, but his greatest flaw is that he can't handle his drink. He drinks too much. So I guess the implication was that I had a beer with pigs. Ooh, that's new. Graphics for the heart. I think that's part of the language patch. Gosh. Let's talk to Tifa. Marlene's a little shy. And yeah, I remember this. Barrett is such a force of nature himself. Like, I just want to highlight this piece of concept art for him. This actually is interesting because yeah, it does showcase that they wanted to do different things with different than they had done previously. I think Barrett sort of epitomizes that. Do you think it's he might be the first black character in the Final Fantasy series? Uses a firearm. I think the cultural thing that I mentioned. There's a lot of Americana. Some of the people have said that it's based on like Mr. T, B.A. Baracus in the A Team. I don't know how much of that is true, but I think I really like his execution as a character, and what I saw of the Final Fantasy VII remake as well, I really appreciated. But yeah, now when you think about where Final Fantasy was at this time, like Final Fantasy VI had stepped its toe into sort of a steampunk style and everything, but they're going fully into that, and I think they also continued that going into Final Fantasy VIII. A bit different, of course. That is even more futuristic. But yeah, really appreciate this. Really like this character and this like in my mind like the definition of a very distinct diesel punk style character. And I wonder if the gun that he has is just for show in this concept art. I like how they gave him polygonal feet for some reason, and a misspelling of heaven on his left arm. He does have a tattoo in the game. I forget if it actually says heaven on it. But yeah, he was initially supposed to have an ammunition mechanic where he could fire different types of ammunition. He also had slight different color variations, but on the whole, he more or less came fully developed. Probably more than most characters. And I think he's really the driving force in these early parts of the story, and you get to his backstory and everything. But yeah, he is very much an instigator of uh, really that his limb. You think maybe his legs were prosthetic as well? Maybe, maybe it's like the Star. Yeah, I was about to mention Star Fox, even though I think that's been debunked or disputed. So we see some benefits that I mentioned previously, and we've seen that already. Some crowds, a lot of people going around in an era before they really understood 3D, like Final Fantasy VII on original hardware. Even a lot of the or not cutscene, but battles, frame rates are very stable. And they do a lot of with movements, body language. They can with this simplistic. When I say sprite based, I don't mean that they're actually sprites, but they're very much based on the types of sprites that we saw in Final Fantasy VI. Share a word with Tifa before we go down. Or not, I guess. Oh. Yeah, we had a beer, so let's have a drink. The little sounds. Just you don't need a lot. You're just a little thing, and The imagination will fill in the blanks. Like, I think it's meant to be the glass, or like maybe an ice cube in the glass or something. And this scene also sets up some things, like Tifa. There's like a divide between the characters. Grew up as childhood friends, but no, Cloud's a little divided. See Tifa is concerned. There's some points later on. There's some false memories I feel I have about Tifa, and because there's gonna be plot points later on where Cloud says things that are demonstrably not true, and Tifa doesn't speak up. But maybe that comes up later. I don't know. And yeah, here you see the light again is like bleeding through the floor of this. One of the rare cases. This 3D object here is kind of rare because so much in the game is untextured 3D polygons, like our characters here, except the eyes. But here we have a textured 3D model in the world. That feels rare for this game. Yeah, I pointed out the Texas sign, Carol. Even here we have chevron. If I make a stream border for this game, definitely gonna be chevrons. Are we watching Sin TV in the background there? Talking big about Soldier. Knows how to push his buttons. Another thing I like about Final Fantasy VII is that there's a fair bit of comedy in it as well. It's something I firmly believe on, which is contrast in games, which can feel like a scary thing to do as a game developer. I definitely know that, because you sort of set up a theme or a feeling that the game should have, and that you get a little afraid to deviate from that. But I do think that contrast can be really powerful if done deliberately. Like, if you're supposed to have a dark and gritty setting, for instance, you kind of need the contrast to that to actually make people care. If it's all misery all the time, for instance, it becomes one note, and that's like criticism some people give, say, Warhammer 40,000. You know, grim, dark things like that. I'm more of a fan myself, but just as an example. You know. I think the Shinra, the way it's written there, is a part of the localization patch. I think it was one word in the original localization. And I like how Cloud gets up in the face of Barrett there, but it's a little thing, but it's another example of how this game benefits from being 3D, because Cloud goes up on his tippy toes to be able to be face to face with Barrett. I mean, I did read out their canonical heights, and it does make sense. Cloud would have to be on his tippy toes too, because he's like Barrett's like 25 centimeters taller than him or something. I do wonder though, I haven't seen it in the remake, but Barrett is like punching a punching bag. Is like punching with his gun arm? Seems a little reckless. Here's a coup. Yeah, Barrett. Yeah. Arg. Money. Let me just read some comments here. Yeah, Final Fantasy 16. I haven't played that a lot, but yeah, I definitely got that. I got that vibe, and I try not to glorify the past or anything. You know, there's good things come out all the time, but I think when it comes to big studio developments, especially with what goes into it, they try for a kind of formula, and they are afraid of what I described of having contrast. And I think it's very telling when you see, I would say, kind of Final Fantasy X onwards, staples being set a little too much in place, and a kind of fear of contrast. And I think because by the time of Final Fantasy VII, there was still no formula to these things, and it's actually very crazy how radically varied the cast of Final Fantasy VII is. Yeah, different, and I think, you know, just going on a personal anecdote here, I'm one of those who started falling out around Final Fantasy X. It got a little strange. Final Fantasy 12 didn't do much for me. Definitely by the time of 13 was like felt like a betrayal. I was like, I'm out. I'm checked out now. And I know I'm not the only one who feels that. And it's kind of like, I almost hate having that opinion, because it's kind of like being a Gen 1er in Pokemon, right? It's just that it wasn't necessarily for me anymore. I think that's fine. I check in a little now and then. I see people play it. I hear good things about the MMO. Plural. I think Final Fantasy 12, definitely I've drew comparison to Star Wars, and I know that definitely has an aspect of Final Fantasy 12, and I don't think I can say much bad about 12. In all honesty, it basically comes much more down to the preference. But yes, Farrell here says I can definitely go on all day about Final Fantasy 13, and Farrell here can go all day about Final Fantasy 14, which I appreciate. Because I never played the Final Fantasy MMOs. I have a really hard time stomaching MMORPGs, but he tells me sort of the best bits, and you know, whenever something happens, it's a little the Final Fantasy 14. My impression of it has a lot of unique, but it's also much as like a Final Fantasy 9 thing. It's sort of self-referential and self-reverent in a good way. So it like gets classes and jobs and items and bosses that connect in some loose way to the overall franchise. And I like that. I like that in Final Fantasy 9, for instance. I like what's going on here as well. Like, we have these characters, and you know, Barrett there saying his usual about the planet and the evils of Shinra and everything, and sort of butting heads with Cloud. And you know, Tifa interjects and tries to find common ground and everything, and we get a lot from Cloud here, who's like not interested in anything, like not the planet, not Avalanche, but also certainly not Shinra or anything, just total mercenary. Final Fantasy IX is my favorite, undoubtedly my favorite in the series. And you know, if you guys can stomach what I've been doing today, we might play that sometime as well. It's been actually already. I like Barrett punching over there. don't think I can reach wedge. Sorry, just big. Sorry. No, isn't that sweet? You say you don't care, but you're here talking to me. If you say so. Okay, wedge. Oh, I forgot Wedge was this empathetic. Can we... It's gonna be difficult, of course, but it's like we have the president on TV right now. Draw any real-world parallels as you want. What I do like about Final Fantasy VII is that it feels... Yeah, people are saying some real dialogue here. Money. Another sort of telltale thing I think that makes this Dieselpunk is also just conventionally screen technology has very much basis on the technology of our time, or at least the time where this was developed, you know, big old TV, CRT, like 90s PC monitor type stuff. Barrett could totally be in Tekken. He would be right at home in Tekken. Doesn't even matter that he has a gun. It's like all sorts of crazy shit happens in Tekken. Just looking around if there's something I can interact with. I might be mistaken, but you know, this game does some things that I don't know what the age rating was for this game, but you know, there's blood later on, we have alcohol, smoking, smokes on the table. Tifa comes pleading. Sorry, the little shrug animation. There are some animations in this game that are very, very iconic to me. Shrug would be one. The squat that you saw in the teaser animation that I did. Yeah, I was about to say, Mulgar, like, especially smoking, it's like 5 to 10 years after this, then it's like all out, all gone, right? This is the 90s still, so. Tifa is like at her last straw with Cloud. And I'm one of those guys who plays nice in most games. I don't like being mean in games, at least not at my first playthrough. And you know, games are conventionally designed around that, like so even something like Baldur's Gate, right? You can play evil, but you're making things harder for yourself, and you know, it's kind of funny the moral bad rap that games conventionally has had, and you really just have every and any incentive to be nice in them. So we're gonna say we're sorry. And this Tifa theme that's playing right now is like comfort food for the ears. And we can see Final Fantasy VII, you know, much like the in medias res part, I feel somebody definitely took a screenwriting class with the tricks that it used, and it does use them very effectively, I'd say. Like establishment of areas, characters, themes. I'm not gonna go, let nostalgia uh, take over me completely here, but for what it was, I think it's very lucky. It was very good. It does remind me of. Oh, hello, Motherload. I know who you are. Nice of you to pop in. Just playing one of the old classics here. Just spinning a yarn about, yeah, really this era and kind of how lucky we were that we got the quality that we did. I think there was a lot of pressure resting on people like this. But I think about, say, it's kind of amazing when you think about it. A lot of things in art and animation that were first, but they were also good and iconic. Like I think about this era and say special effects. You had, your Jurassic Park or a fully CG animated one. You had Toy Story, and here we have like, oh, this is the first 3D Final Fantasy game, and it's Final Fantasy VII. It's like same with Mario. We of course get games that didn't manage to make the transition to 3D, but I definitely feel lucky that we did get this era. Ah, that's great to hear, Motherload. Like, it's always interesting to hear what people think about these old games, especially if they didn't grow up with them. Because, looking at what's on screen right now is evidently very crude compared to what we have now, even thinking about it like stylistically. But it's more than the sum of its parts. No problem, Mulligardo. Take care. Yeah, Dave. And there are games, true classics, that age like different things. Like I think about, say Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time is great, for instance, but you try and explain why Hyrule Field is a big deal to somebody nowadays, and it's, they can understand what you're saying, but to have experienced it at the time is something entirely different. Yeah, this is definitely a combustion inspiration, Motherload. I would say there's many references for combustion. I think this one is the one that hits the closest. And it's kind of funny because, I was basically 6-7 years old when this came out. I had a good grasp of English early on, but it would definitely take time before I would have to come back to really get this game. So I did. Once or twice. I think it's the music that's doing it to me right now. Here Cloud's telling Tifa about his ambitions. But what I can't get over is... yeah. Is it called in English? Like a ponytail behind. And yeah, going back to what I said about, even though it's pre-rendered and everything, this is still a 3D game, because we're doing something now we kind of never saw on the 16 bits, which is just simply looking into the sky. With a perspective going on as well. I think this scene is set in Nibelheim, or I guess would be Niflheim in Old Norse. The game picks and chooses some Norse thing, as well as other mythologies as well. It's interesting that you mentioned Chrono Trigger, because the developers on Chrono Trigger, they were developing Final Fantasy VII simultaneously, but a lot of people on Final Fantasy VII had to work on Chrono Trigger before going back here, and that's why you actually get some crossover between the two games. I think even some sounds are used across, but also just motifs and themes. And we also talked about earlier how a lot of the ideas for Final Fantasy VII that didn't play out, like this was actually supposed to be set in a New York City with a hot-blooded detective, but that eventually a lot of that got used in Parasite Eve. So I think it's just that they were a really tight-knit bunch with same ideas going on at the time. Sorry, I'm talking a little bit over this scene, but you understand what's going on. Making a childhood promise to always be there to save her. And that's what gets Cloud, to stop being this level of apathetic and angsty. That behind the head scratch is also very iconic to this game. I like how animated Barrett is, He decided to climb up that instead of taking the elevator. Just a little funny detail, but he threw the money at Cloud with the arm that has the gun. We also see that the localization patch also colors certain pieces of text. And I like this little detail here, where they're like negotiating terms. And it's like, that's college money for Marlene. Oh yeah, I went into a whole spiel about that motherload, like the lighting in this game, even though it's pre-rendered, and I talked about how it manages to convey foggy. I went on a whole spiel. Trust me, you can watch that in the VOD, and how that sort of led me into having volumetrics lighting in my own game. But yeah, that sort of hazy, foggy feeling that is existing here as pre-rendered exists real time in combustion. And I did also point out the big Texas sign to the right there, which has odd implications if you stop and think about it, but you're not supposed to stop and think about it. This is like a little bit of a odd detail. It's like, while they're out now, Marlene's here in the bar serving drinks? Well, it's the slums. I don't know. Like a family business. Okay, we're gonna play it nice, except when it comes to egging on Barrett. Actually, Tifa, I think you'll find that Cloud is the one who's usually edgy. Right. Mocha Reactor 5. Yeah. I forget, I think there's some highlighting in the original translation as well. For those of you who are just joining, this is the base PlayStation game, but yeah, all edgy. It's all vertex stop, Cloud. This is another good bit of contextualization, and something I do a little bit in my own game. I talked about how to tutorialize players a little bit, and don't be too on the nose about it. And the easiest trick is really let your character be the expert. Let them talk to another character about how something is done. Because now Barrett is the one who's, asking you how to equip materia. And we can skip it, or we can just, go through it. I remember how to do this, of course. Kind of interesting, because the game kind of assumes that you haven't even been in the inventory, which is fair, Probably a pain in the ass to do this, but I do kind of like the idea that you're going through your menus and there's an actual guide telling you what's what. I do like the materials conceptually has like a cost attached to them. I don't know if that exists predominantly to be mechanical or not, or if it's thematic, because you equip magic and you usually get weaker in terms of health. Oh yeah, Kingdom Hearts. I tried. I don't hate it. I tried. But I couldn't do it, man. And it's kind of weird because the people who know me that know I'm very much into video games, of course, but I'm also a huge animation buff, and Kingdom Hearts, especially classic Disney stuff, it should be like two great things come together, but for me it didn't work. I don't know. I'm sorry. Maybe one day I'll try it on stream. Because I'm playing things different just by how I'm doing this. Maybe that's exactly what that game needs to be deeply appreciated, with all the details. You need to be very analytical and pay attention. There we have some swearing. This was also new. I think the localization brings back the swearing in a sense, because I do distinctly remember that Barrett in the original has like cartoon swearing, where he uses like hashtag, $signs, ampersands, and all that. Now we got the materia option. Yeah, Marlene's left to 10 bar. Like 6 or 7 or something. About time you got the job, little girl. Let's check these environments out, Dave, and maybe wrap up for the day. But yeah. Actually, is there... Much appreciate comment. I think this is like the item shop. And I actually have all the backgrounds for this game in a rotating desktop background folder. It's very interesting to just look at them. And here we see more examples of what I talked about. There's like infusions of different languages, predominantly English and Japanese. We don't have a fire, we have some gil, so I'm gonna take one of those. We're probably gonna get some weapons as well. You can take the fire. I think, yeah, we can hit the L buttons to switch between. Quality of life. I described this this menu system as very utilitarian, and you really see that with, if you stop and think about it, because it's all the same menu box, and then you have the character art there. And I think just because of the resolution, I think like the art on Barrett there makes his one open eye all white, like he doesn't have any pupils. That's because of the resolution. Well, thank you, Dr. Wildly. Like, progress is progressing on combustion, and but like a big part of the whole streaming thing is also to, you know, get some variety, get some more stuff to share. And if this is your first time joining, the streams that I'm doing is actually going to be a mix of playing games like this, but I've also been doing art, and a lot of that art is going right back into combustion. I might be doing other stuff like programming, animation, UI stuff, sound, you name it. It all goes back into combustion. And I'm, you know, happy to answer any question people might have for combustion. Another example of how we've gone in a different era compared to other Final Fantasies is like the saturation of a gun shop here. Sells the same gun that Barrett currently has. First time I read the word bangle. There's a lot of words that is funny that we are mainly into video games know just because they're used in video games. Like these accessory items. Like, would you normally have known what a pendant or whatever is? Like a kid. Oh! Shot me in the face. Hey, now listen here, you little shit. Nah. Screw you, kid. This is basically, you know, the gun weapon store, but also like the tutorial house. And yeah. Go in here. This is where it gets a little fourth wall breaking. Yeah. The dog is literally barking controls at me. I'm the position cursor. This is very funny. this is very funny in a way because, you know, this new era and everything. And one of the funniest examples I know about this is, of course, Super Mario 64, where the camera in that game is contextualized as a Lakitu, like those little turtle guys riding on clouds. It's actually holding a camera. It's just sort of funny that you choose to contextualize these things that we now just, you know, take for granted. The camera is the camera. You don't need to explain to me what these things are. I understand what that is, but at the time they wanted to like give you concepts to latch onto, and having a character do that was one way of doing it. And here they just contextualize the little pointer you can activate over your head. Here's another example of what I mentioned, where I feel the art style of the overworld in this game is justified, because consider the time when this was developed and how many different types and amounts of characters this game is able to have on screen without any performance issues. And don't get me wrong, I definitely love how Final Fantasy 8 and 9 look. And by the time of 9, they're actually, you know, gotten quite optimized at it, but you have to remember how little they knew at the time, how new everything was. And so it was kind of better safe than sorry. Here you have another case where, as I talked about, where a competent cloud character is telling somebody else instead of the one that's actively being taught. I think the treasure chest is like on the next floor. This is the so-called save point. Is it not called that? Does it go by... Why are you casting aspersions on the save point? I think you don't have to call it the so-called save point, lady. She's just talking about how later on we get the cell phone. The aforementioned save point. Now it's the aforementioned, not the so-called save point. And it's talking to us. I like you too, save point. Oh. Hello, treasure chest. All these strange characters. This is another example of what I talked about, where the game has a certain whimsy about it. I think this is like a... Pow! Biff! Oh, I forget who it is, but there's like a distinct member on the development team who is mostly responsible for all these funny scenes. And I feel I can relate to that. People who know me, I like to do silly stuff, and I think just when you're enabled to do something, you do it. It's like the rigging dance you do after rigging a character, right? Just be a little silly. Just more tutorial stuff. And, you know, there's fair criticisms to give here. Yeah, I was always bothered by that looping animation, even back in the day, how it's just the opening one over and over, instead of open, close, but I think that would require a specific animation to do that, and, you know, maybe they were pressed for time. I guess a lot of these things we actually don't see in the remake. I could be wrong. You guys tell me if there's a talking treasure chest in the new one. think there's like something we can get. Okay, you can have. Ooh. Okay. Sort of just love all these designs that you see in the game. It's very, very interesting. Like, kids into Bolt? What's that all about? I'm just very fascinated because this is also from an era where there resources you could get they were sold on CDs. That's why you get a lot of repeat of sound effects and textures in games. Those sort of resource CDs. But a lot of it is also just custom, and I think somebody just had really fun making a lot of these things. I know there's somewhere. I think that's actually later. Oh, I thought I could take his money. But yeah, it's like the kid has like a gun on his bed, cans of beer, cigarettes, or maybe they're playing cards, hopefully. And this sort of Japanese doll, I forget what they're called. And what's also interesting when you download these backgrounds, as I have, is that there's a lot more things going on around them, but you're usually very zoomed in. Right. So, let's just set up the next mission, save, and hold it there for today. Yeah, no great NPC variety, crowds of people. We'll see a lot more of that later on. It's just I'm very opinionated on. I think you do things with reason, and I understand how these characters look on the overworld. But I think when you think about where technology was, and resources available, and just how the headaches that probably saved of NPC variety mixed with NPC amount, I think it was definitely worth it. Because when you head to densely populated areas later, it's like, you all know the scene with Cloud and a certain jacuzzi that's later on, and definitely helped by the amount of characters that was able to be on screen during that scene. Right. Let's see. I think we're gonna call it there. This has been very experimental for me. Let's see. Let's head back into the office. Lovely. No, thank you everybody for showing up. I would like to know what you guys think. I feel definitely I need to do a few things on my workspace, so I have like easier access to the on-screen drawing and especially expression changes. Need like a Stream Deck or something for that. But no, I think I like this. I'm keen to do more. Still gonna do more art and such, of course. Healthy mix, and one day also do some indie games. Just keep working at it, keep improving, try and make affiliate, and hopefully be somewhat entertaining or informative to you guys. So I'm gonna stop my recording there and stop streaming and wish you guys all the best. Thank you so much for joining me on this overly verbose and analytical playthrough of Final Fantasy VII. Take care, guys.